Hey everyone, this is Brian from the Tennis IQ podcast. Josh and I hope that you are enjoying the content and discussions that we put out week after week. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us to continue to produce quality episodes, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership. Currently, we have 3 tiers of support: the fan level at $3 per month, the supporter level at $7 per month, and the champion level at $20 per month. Benefits of joining the Tennis IQ podcast community include episode transcripts, participation in book club discussions, and access to monthly masterclasses with me and Josh. For more on these benefits of support, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership. Thank you so much. And now, on to the show. Welcome to the Tennis IQ podcast. I'm Brian Lomax.
And I'm Josh Berger. And for today's episode, we are joined by Bob Litwin. Bob Litwin is an executive, sport and life performance coach, and author of the bestseller, Live the Best Story of Your Life, A World Champion's Guide to Lasting Change. He was the first non-ATP Tour, non-Division I college player inducted into the USTA Eastern Tennis Hall of Fame and recipient of the Vitas Gerulaitis Community Service Award. His tennis career includes being an ITF World Champion, ITF #1 world ranked player, 2-time World Team Champion, 2-time Maccabi Gold Medalist, and 29-time USTA National Champion. In this episode, we talk about a lot. I recently have gotten in contact with Bob, and we both live in the Boulder, Colorado area, and we've played tennis a couple times and met a couple other times, and he's really a great guy and has a lot of great advice and wisdom, and I think you'll all enjoy this episode with Bob Litwin. We are very excited to be joined by Bob Litwin today. Welcome, Bob, to the Tennis IQ podcast.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Brian. Great to be here with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. So we can start off the conversation with maybe a little bit about your background, a little bit about, how you got introduced to the sport of tennis, and a little bit about the start of your journey.
Well, tennis wasn't all that popular when I was growing up. I mean, we played a lot of sports. I was always running around with a ball, doing something. And my dad was a really good athlete. He went to Brooklyn College and he played baseball and some basketball there. And, we were living in Queens, New York. And then he moved us to Great Neck, which is a really nice community outside of New York City. And it was one of the very few communities where tennis was starting to be interesting to people. And my dad definitely needed a sport to play. So he hooked up with a bunch of guys at a club, not at a club, at some public courts. They used to play every Thursday night and every Sunday morning or something. And he used to drag me along, and I wasn't really that interested in tennis. I'd go shoot baskets or something. I'd be 7, 8 years old. And, then he gave me a racket, and I used to go on the court and I would just serve. I mean, I was alone, there wasn't anybody I was playing with. And I'd serve and I'd have these fantasies, just if you used to pitch a ball against a wall and you call strike and ball, I would serve, I would hit it as hard as I could. And I would then call out the score, 15-love. I learned the scoring. But a lot of my serves would go over the fence or into the net, but I always won the point anyhow. It was always an ace. So that was my introduction to tennis. And somewhere along the line, my dad found a guy who was teaching tennis at this park, and his name was Ronnie Stutz. And he really wasn't a very good tennis player, but he was really nice with kids, and he fed me some balls, and it was this is boring. It was really boring to me. So I just kind of dropped it. And I invested most of my time into basketball growing up. So I wasn't really a tennis player, even though I was in a tennis community. I did, though, end up in high school being on the tennis team Great Neck South, where I went, and Great Neck North, which is where a lot of great players came from over the years, they were powerhouse tennis programs, because when we would go to play against another school, we used to have to bring extra rackets for the other kids. So Great Neck North, Great Neck South, Huntington, there were a few schools that just had tennis. And for me, tennis was really an off-season sport. I was completely focused on basketball. And even my coach at that time, my basketball coach, who had a big influence on me, he used to like not even want to talk to me during tennis season. He thought it was like a bizarre sport. He thought I should be playing soccer or lacrosse or something. So, but I did play. I played number one on the high school team. We had a couple of county championships, and I was kind of into it, but a lot of us were misbehaving on the court then. And so we took a lot of static from our parents and the coach. So that was really my beginning until I went to college. I went to Michigan, and I wanted to play on the basketball team, which was ridiculous. But I wanted to try to walk on. I couldn't really find the door to walk on. There was no option. I mean, they were a big powerhouse. So Peter Fishback, who was a great player out of Great Neck, Michael Fishback, his brother, was the spaghetti rackets player. So their dad, Joe Fishback, was one of the only career teaching tennis professionals at that time in the area. Peter Fishback went to Michigan. I kind of grew up with him. He was a year ahead of me. I visited him one weekend. He took me over to meet Bill Murphy, who was the coach, who said, well, if your dream about basketball doesn't work out, you can come out for the freshman team. We don't cut anybody. So I did. I went out after finding out no basketball. He put me on the court to play against the number one freshman recruit, who was John Hainline, whose brother, Brian Hainline, is the president of the USTA. And they were pedigree from Michigan. The dad was on the Davis Cup committee. And the guy beat me love and love. I didn't hit another ball for 4 years. So I had a start and stop experience with tennis. And it wasn't that I was a bad loser, although I think I was. It was more that Michigan was offering a lot of incredible experiences in the late 60s. You know, what was going on then for young students wasn't even about the actual academic education as much as like waking up to the fact that we had voices and stuff. So no tennis. And when I came out, I think this is all worth what your question was, which is basically I ended up teaching school in New York, in a private school. And I wasn't a teacher, but I got a job teaching anyhow. And the person, it was a private school, and the headmaster of the school was a big tennis fan, and he decided he wanted a tennis team. And he made me the coach because my resume at that time was what I did in high school. I had no resume. I was the only one that had tennis mentioned in my resume. He said, you're the coach. I held tryouts, like 3 kids came, like 1 girl and 2 boys. And I hit with them. And it was kind of fun to hit with them. And just like, I didn't know what I was doing as far as teaching went. But during the summer, I ended up getting a job. I still needed to work year round, but you weren't paid in the summer for private school. And I went to work for Joe Fishback. And he was a very popular pro who was a bad businessman. And he used to not show up for lessons. If it was a beautiful day, he'd want to play golf. And he might say, when people show up, tell them my car broke down. It's like, it was wild. And I was there basically stringing tennis rackets. And eventually people said, would you hit with me? I'm here. And then one person said, well, why don't I take a lesson with you? And I was like, let me check with Joe. And he said, great. Here I was, an available assistant pro for him. And he said, charge him $20 an hour and I'll give you $7. And that was the beginning for me. And I really didn't know what I was doing. And I think a lot of pros at that time, and maybe even now, make a lot of stuff up that makes sense. We're sort of reactive teachers. Person hits the ball in the net, we go, oh, you got to bend your knees more, like swing up or open the face of the racket, things that made sense. I had read the Sports Illustrated book on tennis in order to figure out what to do in my first lesson. And I was struggling. I was just like trying so hard to help somebody. And eventually I asked this one person a question like, how come you made that shot? And this guy said to me, you know what? I was so frustrated that I just didn't care. Oh, okay, let's work on not caring, which became accepting. And that was how my teaching style started to develop without any real significant understanding of technique, strategy. I wasn't really a player. So I watched some matches on TV, and that's what gave me information. But basically, I became somebody who was asking questions, bringing attention to when something was good, not bad.
Yeah, which I think is a key component of good coaching is understanding what does success look like and how do we replicate that? How do we create more of that rather than just fixing problems? How do we create based on what we know in our bodies and how we do that? So
And also, Brian, they were telling me what was working without really realizing
that's
it.
right.
Then the next person would come in for a lesson, and I would say, like, okay, we're working on like not caring as much about the result. Oh, that's interesting because this kind of stuff was just not said.
Right. Yeah. There was no non-attachment kind of thing back then, right?
No, not at all. Okay, so that was how I really started teaching tennis, which I did for 35 years, actually.
And then how did it transition to you getting back into competition yourself? And in some ways, I really like this idea of like you became more of a coach first. Maybe you learned how to work with people and on their own success, and maybe that helped you on your journey, of
Oh,
course,
no
right?
question. I should have paid everybody for their lessons. I should have paid them. I was the one who was getting better more than they were. Um, when I was about 29, I had been teaching for maybe 5 or 6 years. I knew that people were getting better with me, and people on the adjacent court, where there were other pros, they were still working on taking their racket back and stepping in. They were getting good strokes, but they weren't becoming better tennis players, really. Um, and I decided to play a tournament because I couldn't understand why my students were not winning more. They would come in and say, like, I don't know, it's like I just, you say when it's whatever, a certain score, just be aggressive, go for it. You got kind of a point you can lose if you need, if you need. And I couldn't understand why they couldn't do it. So I played a tournament, and it was the New York State Clay Court Championships, which is a big tournament on Long Island that was won over the years by Vitas and Butch Seawagon and some pretty serious names, Gene Scott. And I entered it, and damn it, I ended up drawing a guy who played at Great Neck North, who was a year younger than me, but was now a doctor. And I thought, well, he's a doctor. I play tennis all day long. This won't be very difficult. And he crushed me. And I was really, really embarrassed. And I told everybody I was teaching, I'm playing a tournament this weekend. I didn't say come and see me, but like, so that next Monday, people were like, how'd it go? And I was like, oh, easy match, got through it, no problem. I lied because I was so embarrassed. And then like later in that first day, I called each of these people and said, like, I don't know what came over me. I just didn't want to admit that I lost. So I ended up playing some tournaments to try to figure out what is the piece that I'm not giving them that obviously is missing from me also. Of course, it was only one tournament or two or three at that point. And I lost most of the time. I got a couple of wins against people that I was more athletic than. I was a good athlete. So, I started getting some wins, and it was okay. I didn't really love it too much because when I won, I made an excuse. They weren't that good, or I got lucky. I couldn't really own it. I didn't really think I was good at it. That went on for 3 years until I heard about the Maccabi Games, which is the all-Jewish Olympics, that they fielded a team in the 35, in the open and the 35 and over. And I decided to try out for it. And regionally, I got through. And I ended up going down to Philly where the national tryouts were, and ended up getting beat really badly in the first round by a guy from Harvard who played like two for Harvard, a guy named Adam Behrens. But it was a double elimination. And I went out and I won a couple of matches. And then I lost to Brad Gilbert's brother, Barry Gilbert, who was a good player, but like I was totally confused. I thought he was Brian. I thought he was Brad. Not really, but it was like he must be as good as Brad Gilbert, who was I think he won a finalist in the national NCAAs at that year. I didn't make the team, but I was like, geez, I can play with these guys. So I made it my goal that when I hit 35, like I would be 36, it's every 4 years, I'd go out for the 35 and over, and I made it. And that was right around when I started playing 35 and over tournaments. And again, in the East, I had a great first year. I won 4 tournaments. I didn't lose a match, but I played more tennis than people, and I was a really good athlete. And I had a couple of really kind of good fortune wins against some high ranked players. And nobody knew me. So they didn't take me seriously. They didn't really worry about me. Somebody said to me, like, why don't you go to the national championships? And I said, what is that? I didn't even know about it. I ended up going to Palm Beach for the national clay 35s. I had a good run on Long Island. And I look at the draw sheet and I see, why am I not seeded? It's like I had won every match I had played, like in 4 tournaments. And I was playing a seed in the first round. A guy was like top 5 or 6 or 7 in the country. And I checked him out. He was a doctor too. And it said that on the draw sheet. His name, MD. Little guy, kind of strange, weird hat, Turkish towel coming out of his pocket all the way down his leg. I thought, this is a joke. I won the first 2 games. It was like, this is so easy. And I lost 12 games in a row. And that was the beginning of my 35 and over career, where I didn't win a match, main or back draw, for the first 3 years. I didn't play that many of them, but I couldn't get a win. I was pretty good. I would get out and hit with people, and I could do that. And then I just had a breakthrough. I had a breakthrough when I was 40. At 39, I made the semis of the national grass. When I was 40, I lost to Freddie McNair, who was like a Grand Slam champ, and he was like lights out. But I played him a close set, and it started to drizzle. And right when we were at the dynamic moment, it started to drizzle. He put his racket in his bag. He walked off the court, and the umpire was like, wait. He says, I'm not playing. It's too wet. The next day we came out and he crushed me the second set. And the following year, I won the national 35 grass, so I was 40. And later that year, I won the national 40 grass, even though I still was a nobody. But that was the beginning for me of a good run for like a few years.
So Josh, can I just ask a follow-up? Because we went into that conversation, Bob, with you saying you wanted to figure out what's the missing piece.
Yeah.
So after that journey, what did you figure out for yourself that was the missing piece that you could try to communicate to your students?
Well, in retrospect, first of all, I was writing a lot. Like I had journals that I was just writing in when I was giving these tennis lessons, because I was like, I had all these like kind of outlying ideas. And as I was writing, I wasn't really learning what I was writing yet, but it must have been percolating for me. And I think it was like 1974, New York Times comes out. The back page of the New York Times is this huge white tennis ball on the cover of what?
The Inner Game of Tennis.
Inner Game of Tennis. I read this book and I thought, I am not crazy. Here's another guy who's talking about things that are similar to what I'm talking about, but I still hadn't brought it into my own game yet. But just the very first thing that he said about self 1 and self 2 was like, it just hit me right in the brain. It's like, this is where it's at. I have to learn how to shut down self 2. My self 2 is crucifying me. So that was what I was teaching people. And while I was teaching them, I was starting to learn it more. my own, just in my life, just in general, this voice that was not supporting me and helping me feel good and helping me move forward. So somewhere in that period when I started playing tournaments, I identified I am going to spend all of my time training out the negative voice. It started off just by like, no, don't listen to that. Things that were not really smooth or really working, but they were cracking down on this other story. So I think that what occurred over the next several years was that I started eliminating things that were not working, like being impatient, being intolerant with myself, not just my voice, but just like the way I was going about this. Like I should have won that match. It's like, well, maybe not. Or training out an artificial timeline. I should have it by now. Or frustration. Just anything that seemed to be like not productive. I had read from one of the coaches that was famous. I don't know if it was John Wooden or something. It might have been John Wooden, but something that I had heard or read was when you walk out to do something and you want to do it really well, only do things that help you do it well and stop doing anything that takes you farther away from it. And it became fundamental for me, which was this line with people and something I wrote over and over again. People think, say, feel, do, and act in ways that help them get what they want. People act, say, think, feel, and do things that keep them farther from what they want. The key is to do the things that do and say and think and feel those things that give you what you want, and don't bring any of that other stuff in, whether it was tennis or not. So I think the missing piece was a large thing. For me, it was about eliminating, not adding, not getting a better forehand. I already had a good forehand. It was getting rid of what kept me from hitting a good forehand. That's a missing piece, I guess.
Yeah, and it's actually in line with, I'm sorry, Josh, but we've
Go ahead.
recently been talking about a guy named Dr. Richard Young, who has studied Olympic medalists through maybe 12 different Olympic cycles. And he's talked about how when they ask reflection questions of people who repeatedly win, they'll do like a stop, start, continue kind of thing.
Yeah.
That 80% of the successful ones, the ones who have continued success, talk about what they're stopping doing.
Oh.
That they are eliminating things, just as you mentioned, to get down to a simple process of, really trying to attain success, right? And doing exactly what you said. So I think it's very cool, and I think it's a good point to make that through your career arc, you may add a lot of things, but then at some point you got to start figuring out, what do I need to eliminate? What do I need to stop doing so I can be simpler in what I am trying to attain and not have it so clouded by too many things in there. So I just wanted to point that out, Josh, just because I didn't want to lose that. I think it's a good thing for people to hear.
And I want to add something to that, if I may, which is that a couple of years ago, I was going to the National Grass at Philly. It was in the 70s, my first year in the 70s. And I had done very well on grass court tournaments. I won a lot of nationals on grass, a lot of locals on grass. I don't know, I was like made to play on it. Just, I didn't care about bad bounces, and I had good balance, and I was athletic. It was a great surface for me. And when I got there, I always write about my tournaments, and I write a journal. I write about every match. I've been doing that since I was 50. Every single match in a national or a world championship or a senior Davis Cup, I write about it. And not like, oh, I was up 4-2 and then I lost 2 games, but like the stuff that matters, I think. And I was writing about it beforehand. When I went out to practice on the first day, I wrote that night. It's like, I come here and I feel so comfortable. I played at Philly Cricket Club many years. I've won here many years. I love the feeling, the smell of the grass, the whole deal. I'm writing about it. And I said, I have this feeling that I used to have when I was a little kid going to Long Beach with my family on the weekends, throwing a ball around with my dad, where There was no winning. It was just like he'd throw a ball, I'd jump up. It was too high, I'd fall down on the sand. I'd jump up, I'd throw it to him. It was like it was the most like natural athletic experience of my life, probably. And this is the way I feel when I come to Philly and play on the grass. And I think that the elimination of things leaves us with maybe the natural athlete that we are, if we're athletic, for sure. And it allows us to be free. And underlying everything in my game is I feel is my athleticism. And that if I just am being the athlete, it's like walking in New York City. I don't have to look down and see if I'm going to trip over a curb. Everything is like, it's like walking is natural, playing tennis is natural. So the repetitions of doing it have made important things natural also. But underneath it all is that if I just play, that's the best game I've got. And it's also the most enjoyable, win or lose. And maybe later I can talk about what's going on now for me, where I like kind of lost something and have refound it, which has happened many times, but it's current.
No, I think it would be great to hear more about, you sort of outline the journey sort of up until age 40. And it'd be great to hear, more about some of the recent years, some of the, national, international, Davis Cup, different successes, different pieces of that journey, and sort of, and also what's led to that. I mean, you brought up those memories of playing with your dad at Long Beach, and what that actually reminds me of is, and we were talking a little bit about the book, The Inner Game of Tennis, and the impact that had. But we had an episode where we had Sean Brawley on, who you may know, who's from Connecticut, who worked with Tim Galloway for a number of years, and talked about this same idea of interference and things sort of getting in the way of that natural process, of that the fact that, hey, we're out here playing a sport, it's a game, let's be immersed in that and and have fun and enjoy it and try to do our best, but all these other things get in the way, and much of that is thought and criticism and judgment and different things like that. It would be interesting to learn more about sort of once you started having some success, some more success at the national level. It'd be interesting to hear more about sort of your playing journey, and maybe both in terms of results, but also in terms of maybe how you approach things differently.
Well, when I started to win, I still was not really, my self-esteem wasn't up to the level of the results I was getting. So there was still a lot of denying on my part that I was really as good as these results. Despite, okay, hey, you can't deny your results. But I was able to, by like, oh, the guy I played was a really great player, but he had a bad day. Or like, I don't know, I just played lights out today. Or there was a key point that, it could have gone either way. And, like the ball bounced on top of the net and rolled over rather than back on my side. So I had this initial success in this 1 year of winning 2 nationals, but then I settled down back into, I was probably a top 5, 6, 7 player in the country, but there were people up there that I couldn't imagine, playing successfully against. So I was struggling, and I think, trying to figure out at that point why I wasn't enjoying winning and I was so unhappy losing. I think that was like a very common experience for me, that the winning wasn't banged up to what I thought it would be. There were a couple of wins that felt like, wow, this was really great. I really played well. I deserved it. But still, there was a lot of denying the wins. So I was ambivalent still about playing, even though I had reached a pretty good level. And I was also really desperate for people to tell me I was a good player. It was a really, really nasty part of, like, not nasty, but it was like something about myself I didn't like. And it was connected to my own self-esteem. Other people would not have thought this was, but inside me, I was like, gee, why aren't people like congratulating me for winning? Or why doesn't somebody say, oh, you played great? rather than like me only hearing the other things like, oh, you beat that guy 4-4. I would have thought you'd have beaten him love and love. And it would send me, that would be what I would be focused on. So, what was going on was I was just getting out there and grinding it out and playing and kind of starting to enjoy the experience of playing these tournaments, which led to more winning. I just started to let go of the winning, but not in a really direct, conscious, intentional way. But it started to happen. And other things started becoming more important, like as I wrote my tennis mission that I had sent you, like being a good winner and a good loser became really important to me. And my focus was shifting to the non-result in terms of score and more in terms of more personal things. And this did a lot for me with my self-esteem. And then if I was doing well with these other things, like I give full effort. And I wasn't making that up. I would really give full effort, or like, finding the way to like fight when I was on the precipice of losing, even if I was really, really tired, finding energy. These things really started to grow in who I was as a player. And I had this fairly long list of maybe 10, 12, 15 things that were really meaningful to me, like improving in every match, whether it be as a player or as a person. Well, I had so many ways of winning that it diluted the importance of winning the match. And I mean, other people were seeing this in me before I was recognizing it. And then I started to recognize what I was really doing, that I was creating stories that were kind of bullshit when I would write them. But they provided me with the pathway of where I was working, what I was working towards. And if I won a match or lost a match, I was pretty much the same. And it was a progression. It wasn't like something that was absolutely intentional. I want to get there. But I did have a few things like that. And one of them was, it happened really early. I didn't really notice it. It was the year after I won the National 40s. I went back the next year to Santa Barbara to play the tournament. And I went there knowing how hard it is to win a national, and the odds of me defending the title were like really, really small. And I met a guy early in the tournament named Bobby Hansen, great guy. He was the coach of UC Santa Cruz. And he was somebody who worked with a guy named Jerry Lynch. I don't know if you've heard of Jerry Lynch, but he is the Warriors performance coach. He wrote a book called Thinking Body, Dancing Mind, and he and I connected. This is before I played this tournament. And we used to talk a lot, and he had this great view. And something happened when I met Bob Hansen. We had lunch together, and we ended up playing in the semis. And after he beat me, I had a really good tournament to get to the semis. Thought I was going to take it all the way across. He beat me. He played great. It was a good match. And afterwards, I walked up to him and I said, really so happy for you. And that, even though I didn't even know it, that really changed me. It was truthful. It was really true. I was so happy for this guy. And throughout my senior career, I've been very lucky. I haven't lost to too many people behind me, but I have. And there's this one person that I beat like 3 or 4 times, not close, who beat me in a national. And I walked up to him and I said, this is great. This is I'm so happy for you. He says, why are you saying this? I said, I'm not happy for me, but you're a friend of mine. I don't remember people saying to me when I was beating people, I was everybody's worst loss for a while, saying, hey, great going. It's really great. I'm happy for you. Welcome to the club. So I wish I could be more specific about the timing of this, but as I continued to play, things like playing in a state of equanimity became I want to be in a state of equanimity in my life. I'll play tennis as a way to practice it. So again, distancing from the results gave me, by the time I was 55, I was probably, I don't know, it seems like probably every national tournament I played, if I played tennis national tournaments, I was winning 7. I was really, really doing well on Sundays. And And they were like practice for me, practice of other things. I don't know if that was a direct answer to your question.
I think it's an
No, it
excellent
was.
answer. Yeah. Yeah.
It was, and I think it provides a lot of context just in terms of, how you seem to really learn as you went, right? You learned as you went. It wasn't that one light bulb moment where maybe, and maybe in certain ways it was where, after that match where you lost and, were able to feel that happiness for the other player and just be able to, I'm hearing a couple different things. I'm hearing that you're able to keep things in perspective, that you're able to practice certain important life skills on the tennis court through your matches, and that you're able to, more so just play, and not, have all this, not be experiencing all this pressure, not feel like you need to win, not make it all about results. And focus more on, your game and on your process and that sort of thing. And oh, what do you know? You end up that ends up leading to the types of results that you and everyone is after in the first place. So um, you mentioned earlier, as you were sharing that, you talked about the concept of a story, of sort of a story that you'd been telling yourself. And I know that your book, Live the Best Story of Your Life, which Brian and I have both read. I know you talk a lot about that in your book and in the work that you do, talking about sort of, somebody's old story and then how they can get to a point of a new story. And it would be great to learn more about, how you started thinking about this concept, and then also about, and feel free to talk about the book as well, but also about how you incorporate that into the work that you do today.
Yeah. Well, what I again realized in retrospect was that I was in my tennis lessons, I was spending way more time changing people's stories than teaching them how to play tennis, but teaching them how to be in a good place to play tennis by just, people come in for lessons and they're working on things that they can't really do well yet. So as a result, it was typical that people would be sort of complaining or unhappy while they were taking the lesson. I mean, they were enjoying it, but it's like, oh, I'm still hitting the ball into the net. And I would just like instinctively say, okay, but like last week, your ball was hitting the bottom of the net. Now it's hitting the top of the net. Or it's like, I know it's not going deep enough, but it's like you're hitting them over now. And all of these things were sort of what I call the alchemy between myself and the student in helping them stay on the path of working on their game. I was desperate to keep them engaged in what they were doing. And by me, again, not really consciously realizing I was telling a different story, I was being optimistic all the time about them. And so there I was telling stories. And then while I was working at Glen Oaks Country Club, which was a very, special, unique club on Long Island, I was unhappy with my job. I did like teaching tennis, but I didn't like the feeling of teaching tennis at a country club, especially at a club that was relatively close to the community where I grew up, and that a lot of the people that were there were like people I went to high school with. And I was like feeling, is this an upstairs, downstairs experience I'm having? Like I'm hired help? So, and I was like kind of resentful that I was working weekends and Monday was my day off and I didn't have time with my kids in the summer. And when other dads were driving and picking up bagels on Sunday morning, I was on my way to the club. And I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And then I thought, well, like, I didn't just think this, but like, I started to be aware of what was good about what I was doing. Like, wow, what's good about my job is I'm outdoors all summer. This is pretty cool. I run around all day, 6, 7 hours a day. And I was somebody who taught with 3 balls, not with baskets generally. I would run down every ball. I was somebody who felt the rally is the most important thing for people to get. So I was like incredibly fit. I didn't have to go to the gym after work. I was working out every day. People were coming to me and they were like, it was one of the best things in the week for them. They weren't going to the dentist. They weren't going to work. They were happy. This is a pretty good thing. And what I was realizing was a lot of the guys who were my age were like always saying, "Oh, this is such a great job you've got. I wish I didn't have to go to the city and like sit in an office." And I realized these people who had vertical success, financial success, nicer car, whatever, nicer house, taking summer vacations, they don't know anything about these things that I'm teaching, like positive thinking or welcoming adversity. And like, wow, I'm teaching these people things. And all of a sudden, my feeling about my job changed. So that was the first time I actively used a new story. Didn't call it that, but that changed a lot. During this time, Jim Lair's book came out, The Power of Story. And I'm very close with Jim Lair. I was always running after him at every conference, every USTA PTF conference. I always said, "You're my mentor." And he would always say, like, "No, you're my guinea pig." Because I would do everything that he would write. And, you know, I had gone to his 3-day program for business, where he teaches people, you know, Fortune 500 company CEOs. I went for 3 days. And it was during that time that he was kind of presenting the idea of story. Maybe his book hadn't come out yet, but it just resonated for me. And I wrote stories as a result of that for myself, life stories, which is what he wanted us to do. And again, I still wasn't using it as a specific technique on a conscious way, but I kept writing stories. And then I got this job. I was called up by people from Wall Street to come and be a coach. There weren't any of, there was like one person who was doing that, a guy named Ari Kiev, was a psychiatrist who was working for SAC Capital, Steve Cohen, who was the greatest trader. And he worked for a couple of other companies and he couldn't give them as much time. And one of those companies came after me. And it was a pretty cool way it happened, but it's not really relevant. And I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know if I could do it. And I went there and I said, "This is a fit for me." Just after one day, I said, "This is great. This is what I want to do." And I was still being a reactive coach. Somebody would be like in a funky mood. I would get them out of the funky mood, one-off situations. And then I went through a tough period. I started with a second firm. It was both my business world was wonderful. I was learning more, helping people. And then on a day in September of 2007, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. And after 3 years, she had passed away. But during that 3 years, I had to walk my story into the office every day of, you know, I'm rock solid. I maintain like control over my physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional self. I like do all these things. I was modeling for these people that were investing money with this experience I was having. And after she passed away, my daughters both said to me, "It's time for you to write the book." "What book?" "All the lessons." So I started to write it. It was going to be first started being about like, oh, on September 2007, I got this phone call. No, I don't want to write about that. Then it was about welcoming adversity. And then it was just something that started to flow as the model that I'm using with people. And by writing the book, that's when I learned what my model really was. Before that, I was doing the model, but I thought that I was just kind of pretty good at reacting to people and coming up with solutions for them to get better. So that was how I ended up writing the book. It took me 5 years to write it. It was a really great and difficult experience. And I think I've been fortunate. I've had a lot of nice things that have happened in my life, but I think it may be the single best thing I've ever accomplished. And to this day, I feel lucky that I have a model. I didn't create it. I think Jim didn't create it either. People were writing stories like on the caves. And so, but, Jim's always been supportive of me and I've always given him a lot of credit. And it's been, just having a book out there was really a great feeling. And it's still selling 5 years later. It's got what's called shelf life. So, and my work is so easy, really, because I don't tell anybody what to do. They tell me what's not working. And then I coach them, or I show them how to work on it as an athlete would work on improving a forehand. It's like, do the reps, man. Get your news story, do the reps. And the hard part may be looking inside yourself to be able to tell me what's not working. Like, oh, I'm impatient. Okay, great. We can work on like, I have infinite patience, even though it's not true, but at least you've got that out there that you're moving towards. And if people persist and keep working at it, they make progress. Hit ratio is really, really high. And I never try, I still say on Wall Street, like, hey, I'm the dumbest guy in this room. But you tell me what you need, I can coach you to get good at it. I'm not going to tell you what you need. I might think I know, but I wouldn't say it.
So I wanted to follow up on, the old story, the new story, that format that you're using with people. And certainly people can get more, the exact ways of doing that through the book, as well as Jim Lehrer's Power of Story. But would you mind just detailing a little bit of like what that process looks like and what it sounds like when you're working with a client? What exactly is the old story? What is the new story? Maybe also why you need to write the old story before you write the new story, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, people who call me up, well, when I work at a hedge fund, I'm working with everybody in the firm. Like I work for one hedge fund. There's 100 people there. So there's a lot of opportunity to work on my personal mission, which is for these people, in order to generate lots of P&L, which is that they hired me because they want these people to be doing good work, is to do what I can to help individual people be extraordinary all day, every day for the rest of their lives. And then I got 100 people. So there's plenty for me to do every time I'm there or on the phone with people. So, but individual people who call me up, they're calling me up because something's not working for them. That's why people come to coaches. They want help in getting better outcomes. So let's say somebody calls me up and they're trying to, their thing is, I've been like involved in trying to build a particular business and I'm sinking a lot of money into it. And I have like, my family is involved with it. So I'm really committed to it, even though this isn't my main job. But, I started a restaurant in New York and it's COVID now. And nobody's coming in and we don't have like, deep roots yet. How do I know when to like cut the cord? Can you help me with that? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know because I can't help you with that, with an answer to that just based on that question. I have to know a little bit about you and how you operate. So, why don't you let's just talk about this a little bit. Like, what do you think keeps you from being able to make this decision? Well, it's like, I don't want to disappoint my family. Okay, I write that down. It's like, that's a bad story. It's not a bad story. It's actually quite nice, but it's not helping that person get to make a decision. It's interfering with the decision. It's like, it's like, and it's just like, I'm just wasting a lot of money. Okay, well, that's a particular story about money that maybe there could be a different story about the value of money. And I'm impatient to make the decision. So let's just say those are the three things that come out of a conversation. Usually there's 10 or 15. Once my initial thing is like, I'm just kind of chatting with people. I ask them a few questions and they tell me, again, what's not working. And I say to them, it's like, so that's a story. It's true. I get it's true, but it could be partially false, maybe, or it could be a faulty assumption. I don't know. Oh, okay. But calling it a story, how is that story working for you? Well, it's not. Good. Okay. What if you had a different story? I mean, it's really as simple as that. What if you had a different story? Like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, all right, this thing about patience. Okay, you're impatient. Well, I'm just saying I'm impatient about this. I said, well, look, if you're impatient about this, you're probably impatient about other things too. So like we can cover everything by just sticking with the word patience and not modifying it, say, I'm impatient about making this decision. Why limit it? If impatience is not working, let's get a new story. So what if your new story was like, I have infinite patience? They're like, well, I don't. I know. I know. But what if you did? Would that be okay? Well, yeah. Okay, well, let's write that story. It's not true, but you can put it out in front of you. And then using this part as an example, here's what you do. You first of all, you write down the old story, not because I want you to keep it, but because I want you to have this list, literally, not just on your computer, something you can print out. And after we've done some work and we're putting these old stories in the rearview mirror a little bit, you'll burn it or you'll throw it in the toilet or whatever. You'll just like do something, to identify no more old story. So you have a new story, you write down the new story. If you don't like it as, I have infinite patience, write it in a way that resonates for you, but make it kind of short and cute or something like, my middle name is Patience, anything. And what you do is initially, when you are aware that you're being impatient about something, it doesn't have to be about this thing you're working on. It could be you're waiting online for a Starbucks and you're impatient. There's a training opportunity for you. So in that moment, all you need to do on day 1, day 2, day 3 is just say, oh, wait, I have these 2 stories. My new story is my middle name is Patience. Maybe nothing's going to happen. But maybe the second or third time you're in Starbucks or you're waiting for a cab or something, you're going to say, oh, my middle name is Patience. I'm going to take a few deep breaths. Oh, so now the action flows out of this made up story, that what you need to do flows out of what you aspire to be. And then it's a matter of like staying in the game with that, even when you've made some good progress, that over time with X number of reps, I can't tell you how long for you. It could be really quick. It could be like a month or 2 or 3 of doing the reps. This way of being will flow into who you are. And then you won't have to tell yourself anything, just like learning to hit a forehand and following through. You do it enough times, you don't need to think follow through. It's part of who you are physically, mentally, neural pathways. So that's the approach. So my process with people, my method with people is I'll only work with somebody for 3 months maximum, where these are already people that are pretty successful at things. And I say to them, look, if after 3 months you're not making progress on these stories that you've created for yourself with me, I suck or you're not doing the work. Let's shake hands. I'm sorry. Not a lot, but there are times that I start with somebody and in the first 2 weeks, I know it's not going to work. And I say to them, look, I don't think you have the time or the motivation right now to do it. I'm not going to motivate you. I mean, you got to want to do it. I can be motivating, but I'm not going to spend time motivating you. So, you know what? Here's the check. We're done. Don't worry about it. Take what you got. I'm happy for that. So the first month is like the setup, the writing the stories. Why write it? Because when you write stories rather than think them, they become more linear. The loop experience in the brain isn't going on where there's no like end. There's no end. There's no real clarification. When it's on paper, you can look at it and say like, geez, if this was somebody else's story, I could help them. So the first month is the setup, writing the old story. We edit it back and forth a couple of times. It's maybe like 3 or 4 sessions, even in a week. I'm happy to drill down hard right away to get these stories done. The second month is mostly me staying on people every day, because these are things that they're not going to remember. They're busy. And it's okay that I'm reminding them if they're working on their health and they've said, oh, I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week. My new story is I take care of my body, which means I go to the gym 3 times a week. Hey, did you go to the gym? I text them, I call them, I email them. So I'm fully engaged with them for this whole second month. By the third month, I'm pulling back. I'm pulling back, and it's up to them. Reach out to me. Let me know if you have a win. Let me know if you're backsliding. Let me know if you're like totally rejecting the method. I'll get you back on track. By the end of the third month, hopefully they've become story writers themselves, and they can use it forever. So even with my rate, which, maybe at this point might seem like a high rate for people, I always say to them, like, okay, well, like divide it amongst the number of days in your life. Really, if you've learned to be patient and people are pissed off at you that you're impatient for your life, it's like small price to pay, whatever it is. So it is a very, very simple technique. And even when I wrote the book, I only wanted it to be the first 3 or 4 chapters. But my publisher said, like, we can't, you're a nobody. We can't like publish a book that you wrote 3 or 4 chapters. You got to come up with more. And that was where the 33 chapters came in, which were alchemy, what I would be doing back and forth with a student.
That's
Anybody can do it.
Go ahead.
And really, you had mentioned like why did I write the book? Look, I feel like I live a life of service. I really, really love when people I know or I talk to or I have influence over make positive changes and make transformations in their lives. That's what I love, especially at this point in my life where I have everything that I need and more. And I wanted other people to be able to change. And, the fact that I hear from people around the world, like, oh, I could never get out of my basement because of the experience that happened in my life. And now I'm like out. I'm like living a life now. It's like the biggest gold ball of my life.
That's amazing. It's amazing to be able to, to find a system, find a process that works. I mean, you may call it a simple process or simple, sort of a simple thing, but it's obviously effective, and just to be able to reach, a lot of people. And so tell us a little bit about, sort of where things are right now. I know you're living out in, I believe, in Lafayette. I know, right outside Boulder. I'm, not living not too far away from you. We've met on the tennis court. I think we will tomorrow as well. But what are you working on these days? What are you excited about these days? I know you're playing a lot, you're competing a lot, doing work with different, with the hedge fund, but different types of people. So what are you working on and excited about these days?
Okay, I want to tell you that, but I also want to tell you one other thing before, if that's okay. I've been really, lucky to have won these things. I have one in my room. It's like, you win a national championship, you get this nice box and a little gold ball in it. So I give them away at this point. Like Billie Jean once said to me, it's like, all these trophies I got, they're in the basement. And then, I was like, really? But then years later, I realized, yeah, that is where they are. And winning a national championship for me is like representative of a lot of work that people do. The Jimmy Parkers, the Brian Chaney, they don't just show up. Jimmy's won 170 gold balls, Brian Chaney, 105. He's my doubles partner. So it means a lot. When I look at it, I don't really think in that moment, like, God, I've worked so hard my whole life, to get to these results. But I have a lot of grandchildren. And over the years, I've given these gold balls to my wife, to each of my daughters. Every one of my grandchildren knows they're going to get one, but they don't just get one. And I have one of my grandkids out here who plays hockey, and he's 13. When he was 10, he said to me, when am I going to get my gold ball? It's like, well, you don't just get one. I know. I said, well, what do you know? I know I have to, every shift I have to give 100%, even if I'm tired. I said, yeah, okay. Well, when you start doing that more, then we'll talk about your gold ball. And when I give a gold ball away, I write for that person specifically, and I identify qualities that they've developed that, I respect so much. So made me realize, I've been asked a lot, how did you get to like win all these gold balls? And I started to think about doing a talk at Tennis Congress. I don't know if you know about it, but I was running the mental training aspect of that. And I was thinking about, I don't know, I'm fit and I train, I work hard in the gym and I eat well. And it's like, yeah, everybody does. That's a good player, really. The good players are all doing the same stuff. What do I do differently? So I started working on a talk called The Truth About Winning Your Gold Ball. I felt the truth was relevant, not here's how to win a gold ball, which would have been go to the gym, do these exercises, eat right. And it took me like 3 or 4 presentations to get it right. I sort of refined everything down to 3 things that I thought I was doing that was really different from other people. The first one is, not was, but is, I truly have loved the journey. Even all the losing, even the disappointments, it never really took me out of the game. All the ups were good, all the downs were good. I pretty much stayed in the middle with all of it. So I know we all hear like, the journey is more important than the destination or whatever. It's like, I really have been that. No BS. And I don't think people generally, like the parts that are hard or not working. The second thing was that this recognition that getting rid of things that don't work was different than other people that were always adding. And the third thing was writing. I felt that writing was my coach. What came out of my fingers when I was typing, I never knew what it would be. But there were things that were revealed to me that just were flowing out of me by just after a match, writing without thinking about it, without it having good form, good punctuation, or even like a clear beginning and an end. But it always did. The beginning and the end was the first day I wrote to the most recent one. That's the beginning and the end. And there's no end yet. So I just wanted to mention like that talk had a huge impact on people. Obviously, I could probably do an entire podcast in those 3 things, which I'm not going to do, but those were the 3 things that I felt were the truth about me differentiating myself from others who were as good or better or not quite as good as me physically on a tennis court, tactically, fitness-wise. Okay, what am I doing now? Well, one of the stories of my life is I live my life in a state of Kaizen. Kaizen is ongoing incremental improvement. I read about it years ago, had to do with like Honda, with the Japanese method of business. And I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to be getting better every day, somehow. And, over time, I didn't forget about it. And anytime at this point in my life that I trip over anything, or I act the way I don't like to act, or something happens that I don't deal with well, it's an instant new story for me. It's a short story that may not be like a life story, but it is like a life story. And I immediately get to work on it. The time between me recognizing that I'm not good about something for myself and for others, the time it takes me to write a new story is like an instant now, rather than like, I'll get around to it. Because if I don't take it on right away, it's a way of me saying I'm okay with what I'm doing. So right now, what I'm working on, I'm in the 3rd quarter of my life. And I feel like it's the perfect time for me to put the biggest emphasis on ideals and on things that really, really are of huge value in my life, like more love, more compassion, more acceptance. More might not be the right word. It's just like expanding those parts of me that I have found to be like really things that I feel good about, and know that I can always be expanding those things. Being kinder, listening better, being clearer when talking, understanding. Yeah, so I'm working on these things. In my tennis, I've had a couple of breaks over the last few years. A year and a half ago, I busted my clavicle, so I was out for 9 months after surgery and then like the rehab, and I was out for 9 months. And I came back and I was like, my game was like really, really weird. It was like I was off balance. I was out of position. I wasn't running for balls. I thought, did I hit my head when I broke my clavicle? I mean, I really thought something had happened, and I was really feeling frustrated. And I play mostly people that are like 20 years younger than me or so out here in Colorado, and they hit big balls. And maybe there's been my not big loss of speed, but my loss of coverage and the increase of the pace have made it more difficult for me. And I was getting more locked in on like, I don't know, I'm losing every time I play. I was before anyhow, but I was just playing with these people I practice with. And it was really, really a struggle. And one buddy of mine, do you know Brad Bernthal? Have you met him yet?
I don't. I know the name
Yeah.
sounds familiar.
But he's one of the better players in Boulder. He's a law professor, and he has two daughters who play college tennis. He ran something called the Brain Cramp Camp. Cool title, because he wanted to help his kids, and he used to have all these different kids who play at the high schools that he would be working with every week. And I was playing with him, and I said, pretty bad, huh? He said, like, no, you're playing like similar to the way you've always played. I said, I don't think so. He said, Bob, look, you're like you're a champion. Like, you think you're not going to find your game? But I thought I wasn't going to. I didn't remember what I am. And I lightened up a little bit, and I watched a video of Federer, like 2 minutes. And I saw how fluid he was, how smooth he was, and how athletic he is. And I thought, I've been trying too hard to win again, even in practice. I'm not even this way in tournaments, but in practice, I'm making myself miserable by trying to beat people that really I can't beat them most of the time. I can win points. And I've lost my athleticism. The tension in my body is helping me play worse. So it was a great revelation. And the next day I went out and I played with CJ, and I just was being athletic. And I found more length in my swing. I'd been stopping my swing. I found earlier backswing because I had been tight. So in my tennis, that's what I'm working on. I'm like really excited on the court. And I love the fact that after all these years, I love being on the court. And I do love problem solving, but I let the results after I had the surgery really interfere. I started to worry. I'm done. I don't think I can do this anymore. I thought I'd be playing forever. I don't know if I can do it anymore. And that was what I was able to get rid of, or I am getting rid of that again. And like, that's why before this, I said to you, hey, did you see they've had the 95 national grass courts? That wasn't me saying I'm going to be playing that, but boy, maybe I want to play, always. I love it. It's just such an incredibly rewarding experience for me.
Well, it sounds like through that patch that you were talking about, after the surgery and everything, it sounds like you caught yourself. You noticed that story that you were telling yourself about where you were at and about maybe I'm done, maybe I'm not gonna be able to, keep playing the way that I was, and you were able to make those adjustments, which I think honestly is sort of sounds like in certain ways it coming full circle in terms of, and not full circle in terms of I think it sounds like it's a constant process of, noticing when maybe you're not approaching something in the way that you want to. And, as you said, now it's through that practice, through that repetition, it's a lot faster now. Okay, now I can just come up with that new story a little bit faster. But no, I think, this has been, go ahead.
I was going to say that I don't always know if I have a bad story going on. I don't want anybody to think that, well, I'm like, I got it. I didn't know the story that I was telling, even though I was thinking, maybe this is it. I can't come back again and play good tennis again. I heard that, but it just wasn't, it was reflected back to me by somebody else, basically, by saying, you forgot who you are. So
That makes sense. No, but it's a constant process, right? And sometimes you may be aware of it, sometimes yeah, hearing it from somebody else, but no, it's been awesome hearing about your journey and your story. And I think there's a lot that people can, take away from this. And again, we, definitely encourage people to check out your book as well, where there's a lot of great, every chapter is nice and short, and the every chapter is a lesson in itself, and that would definitely encourage people to check that out. And any sort of final thoughts, or any ways that if people want to reach out to you, and learn more about you, any place that you would point them?
they can go to my website, boblitwin.com. They can reach me through the website. My email is there. Well, my email is focused130@gmail.com. So, I'm happy to hear from people, and you get me and I'm like in between sessions, that they'll probably get a session because it's just what I do. It's like I live and breathe, this stuff. And after all these years, I'm still super, super excited about the work, and I'm going to keep doing it, forever, however long that's going to be. I really appreciate you having me on. I wish I had heard more stuff from Brian too. It sounds like he's loaded with a lot of great info, and you as well. I look forward to playing tomorrow, and it's been really great. Thank you for letting me go on my riffs. Again, I could go on forever. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and good luck to you guys with your podcast and the work you're doing. I'm sure you're doing great work.
Well, that was a great conversation, and thanks again to Bob for joining us. That was really awesome. And I would say my biggest takeaway was actually came a little bit more towards the end. Bob has, as he talked about, has had really an incredible journey within the sport, and just hearing about how more recently, he had this injury, and coming back from the injury, he felt that his game wasn't exactly where he wanted it to be, or it just didn't feel quite right. And then somebody had pointed out to him, you know what, maybe he's not maybe he wasn't living, maybe he was telling himself a story that wasn't 100% true, or wasn't helping him 100% in the way that he wanted it to. So I like that part of it, and in a certain way it came full circle, because I think it's that reminder that the process never ends. It really is a constant learning process, a constant process of being able to check ourselves, being able to be aware enough to notice when we're getting in our own way, whether that's with how we're talking to ourselves, or the stories that we're telling ourselves. And I think, somebody like him who's gone through what he's gone through, and has really, really utilizes this approach himself, for somebody like him to come to that recognition, or to be, made aware of that, and then to become, aware of that as well, that he, wasn't necessarily using his own story in the best possible way, but then to recognize that, to make those changes, and to just see the way that he's continuing to fight for national championships, world championships, really trying to be the best player that he can be at his age, is just so inspiring. But I thought that part in particular, just sort of seeing that, this process of, examining our old stories and coming up with new ones, that process never changes. And I think it's a great reminder that, that it really is a lifelong process for us.
It's a great point, Josh. I'm glad you highlighted that, because sometimes we go through processes like Bob's story writing piece, and we might feel like we're fixed. We're not. There's always going to be more coming up for us, and as more happens to us in life. So I think it's about being vigilant around understanding that. And one of the points I wanted to bring up I wanted to actually bring up two. One briefly. He mentioned 3 items at the end that he felt has really helped him differentiate himself from other people. And one of them was about writing about his tennis. And I thought that was really very cool because it's ingraining the learning process into what you're doing. And as he mentioned, he was typing, he mentioned typing. It doesn't have to be handwritten. That could take a while. But if you can type it out and really just think through that process, it's going to help with those stories. It's just going to help you process what happened, learn from it. As we've mentioned many times, this is about becoming the best player you can become, and it's a learning process. So would highly encourage people to tune into that in their own careers. And then the other point I just wanted to touch on briefly, Bob mentioned a lot of eliminating things from what he did, stopping things. And as we noted in the episode, that's very in line with what athletes who are successful over a span of time tend to do. They're not looking to add new things all the time. They're actually looking to eliminate and simplify. And it might be a good opportunity for people who are listening to look at what they're doing. And are there things that they could stop doing that would improve who they are as tennis players? I mean, it's a very simple one. Maybe you stop looking at your phone before you go to bed as to help with the quality of your sleep. Maybe you examine how much sugar or desserts you're eating or something like that. Stop little things like that. Make a big difference. So I thought overall, great conversation. We really probably could have gone on for hours, and it seems like Bob could have gone on for hours, but I think there was a lot there, Josh, and appreciate you asking him to be on the podcast. So it was great. All right, well, that's our show for today. Thank you all for listening. For more on today's episode, please check out the show notes. If you have any feedback or questions for the two of us, please email us at tennisiqpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the content that Josh and I discuss on the show, please rate and review the podcast so other tennis enthusiasts can find it more easily. Additionally, to be notified of new episodes, please subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice, including YouTube. You can also check us out on Instagram. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership, where you can learn about the benefits of being part of the Tennis IQ podcast community. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon in our next episode.